Hi and welcome to Optimum TV. I'm Stephen Adams and today I'm joined by Renée Lucander, who joined Hansa Biopharma 6 months ago or so as Chief Executive. Hi Renée.
Hi.
Great to have you on. So for those who don't know much about Hansa Biopharma, tell us a little bit about what the company does and the sort of therapeutics that it's involved in.
So Hansa has a unique platform of enzymes, very novel, that basically these enzymes cleave IgG. So these are the ones who actually manage your autoimmune system or immune system. And so they cleave all of this IgG very, very rapidly and specifically. So within 2 to 6 hours, you've basically reduced IgG down to levels below 5%. And this really can be used in a couple of different therapeutic areas in desensitization for highly sensitized patients awaiting kidney transplant, for gene therapy patients that have a lot of antibodies against AAV vectors and therefore cannot be given gene therapy. And also then kind of in certain autoimmune diseases, which are IgG mediated, such as anti-GBM and GBS.
Okay. So as we said at the start of this call, you joined in April 2025 after a fantastic exit from Calliditas, a $1.1 billion exit. So you could, I'm sure you've hung up your boots then, but you've decided to get back into the game. What was it about Hansa that made you think, yeah, this is worth a go?
It is really the fascinating technology and the science behind it. So actually, and we just actually read out some really exciting phase 3 data in a clinical trial where we're looking at really desensitizing patients who have very high levels of antibodies and therefore have a really, really hard time finding a matching organ for a transplant. And what you can see is actually there's really nothing else out there today that can do this. So everything else really out there in the market requires several weeks. It's quite complex and complicated to do it. And they can never really get down low enough in terms of IgG to allow for some of these things to happen. So Hansa really has a unique product and really a unique kind of positioning, which really I think is fascinating to be able to take this, kind of Swedish science and really kind of bring it to patients where there's really a really significant unmet medical need today. So that's really, I think, the key here is to really be able to kind of bring this out and explain exactly what this platform does and, launch this to patients in the US who, today really have no alternative.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds very exciting. Now, talking about Calliditas, you've, I understand, brought in a couple of familiar faces from Calliditas. Who have you brought in and why have you brought them in?
So there were some of the positions actually that were vacant when I joined Hansa. So there was actually no one there. And I felt that it was important that we had this expertise. So I brought in Chief Medical Officer from Calliditas, Richard Philipson. I brought in President of the US, Maria Törnsen, who's also now our COO. And then I really kind of also brought in other key positions where I think it's really important that we have knowledge of how to kind of launch products in the US. So head of medical affairs and head of market access, all kind of, were positions where I felt we really needed recent kind of experience of launching in the renal space. So those two positions came from Calliditas. And then we also have, really the VP of Regulatory, SVP of Regulatory and Human Resources. So there is kind of a group of people clearly kind of here, as well as legal in the US, which I think is another important piece of any company that's going to do something in the US.
Okay. Now, I'm talking about data, and you alluded to a trial a little bit earlier. Your lead program in imlifidase, correct me if I've got that wrong, has shown great results in a phase 3 US trial. Please elaborate on that. And why is this particular treatment important for kidney transplant patients, I understand, and how is it different from existing medications?
Sure. So in terms of the phase 3 trial, this was a 64-patient trial with a randomization 1-to-1 with a control arm and an active arm. And so these patients are highly sensitized, which means that they have a kind of plethora of antibodies. That really means that it's very, very difficult for them to find an organ naturally that has that kind of very, very specific match. So you're really talking about maybe 0.1% of patients, really. So the patients in this trial had what's called a CPRA score of 99.9 or higher. So very, very, very challenging and sometimes impossible for these patients to ever get an organ allocated to them with that kind of a profile. So this trial really, enabled these. Basically, what you do is you remove some of those antigens from their profile, because otherwise you can't get an organ. So you make them less sensitive, to be perceived as less sensitized, and then they are actually being able to find an organ through the natural kind of matching process. But as they then have this organ allocation, the question is, will you then go forward with the transplantation, knowing that this organ obviously doesn't really match you as it stands. It is what's called a positive cross match. But with imlifidase, you can basically reduce that in 2 to 4 hours, and then basically be able to transplant this organ into this patient and then manage them with a normal kind of autoimmune suppression regimen afterwards.
So you're enabling them to receive an organ.
Exactly. We're enabling these patients to get a transplantation, which they otherwise would really struggle to do. And what's interesting in the control arm, the actual p-value of the trial was 0.0001. So a very, very, statistically significant and clinically meaningful outcome. In the control arm, you can imagine all these patients, are on the waiting list. They're on dialysis. They're highly sensitized. This is a highly motivated patient population and physician population. But out of all of those 32 patients that had that option, but couldn't use imlifidase, but really had to use, they could use anything else that was available to them, literally anything. But, less than 10% of those patients and physicians really felt that they could move forward because there really isn't anything out there that has that kind of, ability to make everybody feel like, this is kind of an effective and safe way of kind of proceeding with desensitization. So I think this really shows that there is a very significant unmet medical need.
Okay, great. Now, this is a US trial, as I understand it, and you have plans for imlifidase to launch it in the US market, do you?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a very concentrated market. So 80% of kind of adult transplants really are conducted in about 100 transplant centers in the US. So this is a really limited kind of commercial footprint that's required. And it's a very kind of market access and medical affairs driven kind of activity, which is why I think those positions are key as kind of preparing for this launch. And so I think it's something that, we can certainly easily manage to do ourselves. And as I said, the team has quite an extensive experience of rolling out kind of, products in the renal space in the US.
Okay. And briefly, does imlifidase have potential outside this particular indication? If so, where?
So obviously we're also looking at the same kind of desensitization in gene therapy, for example. So as a transporter to deliver gene therapy, a lot of companies use AAV vectors. And those are things that a lot of us have kind of antibodies against. And some patients have a lot of antibodies, and therefore they're not able to really kind of have that gene therapy delivered to them. So that's another kind of situation where we delivered clinical data in September and October, showing that with imlifidase, we can cleave through those antibodies and actually enable that gene therapy to be provided. And we also we're reading out of phase 3 in a ultra rare, another kind of nephrology related kind of disease, rare autoimmune disease called anti-GBM. And so this is also kind of somewhere obviously where this can be very much used to kind of, it's an acute, really severe disease that really attacks your membranes around your kind of kidneys as well, and your lung membranes occasionally. So this really means that, we can really with this drug hopefully show that we can really save the kidney function of these patients and not have them end up on dialysis. So there are kind of other areas for sure. And obviously this is something where if you are in a situation where your antibody profile really is preventing you from doing something, and you need that kind of, fairly rapid, very safe and targeted kind of effect of cleaving kind of IgG, both intra and extravascularly, in a short period of time, I would say that's, any kind of indication that would benefit from that, I would say imlifidase could potentially be appropriate for.
Okay. And your wider pipeline?
So in terms of, we have a follow-up enzyme that also comes off the same platform. It's more potent and more durable. It's much less immunogenic than our lead compound, and that's referred to as 5487. And so we're actually taking that into hopefully a late-stage trial in Guillain-Barré syndrome, GBS, which is a neurological kind of peripheral disease. So actually provides paralysis kind of and so even some patients end up with mechanical ventilation, et cetera. So in that particular kind of rare disease, we're taking that forward. And so we are going to interact with the FDA in the beginning of next year is the plan, so that we can get some input on the kind of, clinical trial design that we're proposing for that indication. So this would basically kind of create a second kind of rare disease focused neurology related franchise for the company.
Okay, great. And finally, Renée, next 12 to 18 months, what do you hope to achieve with Hansa Biopharma in that timescale?
So actually, we have a pretty busy 12 months ahead of us. So the plan really is to file the BLA before the end of the year. So internally, we are absolutely on track to do that. So file the BLA. We're reading out the anti-GBM phase 3, as I mentioned, before the end of the year. So in December, we're reading that out. We're hoping that obviously for the FDA to accept the file and give us a PDUFA date in late February, if that kind of schedule holds. And we would be asking for priority review, which would hopefully then put us in a position to get an answer from the FDA towards the end of August. And if that is a positive answer and acceptance, then we could launch commercially in the US, following that kind of positive outcome. We also have an ongoing phase 3 trial in Europe with 50 patients that have been transplanted. And that was fully recruited in March of this year. So we're expecting that to read out in the middle of the year next year, which will also kind of be an event. And we're also planning to present the full phase 3 data of the US trial at the ATC in June next year. So really kind of a lot of things to kind of look forward to. And obviously on the basis of feedback from the FDA, we also hope to obviously start our late stage clinical program in GBS later in the year in 26.
Sounds like it's full steam ahead. Aguiar-Lucander, CEO of Hansa Biopharma, thank you very much.
Thank you.